This is that TTI AR-15 Ultralight from ZHNEDUO Toys, or ZHNEDUO Blaster. Basically, the John Wick style AR-15, which I've shown you before. Now, I've taken it apart. I'm going to talk to you about that and what I did. And then, because there's definitely some nuances and differences with this blaster that I'm going to point out to you. And then we're going to do a spring upgrade to an M95 SHS spring from EMERBU Toys to go ahead and go inside this TTI AR-15 from ZHNEDUO Blaster. So, much like all V2 blasters, the basics of taking this part are the same. But like I said, let me point out a few things. First, taking the buffer tube off is easy, right? That's just a screw that you're going to reach into the buffer tube and unscrew. So that should be nice and easy for anyone to do, right? So you're going to unscrew that out. And then you have this little piece right here that's just going to slide off, okay? So no differences there. Now, I left the handguard connected to the upper receiver because there's no reason to remove it for what I'm doing here. So what I had to do next was we had to remove the upper, which just meant popping out this right here, right? Now this one on that pin, so this is a pin there, but then it's also spring loaded and has that little metal tip. So that spring actually goes into this tiny hole, and that metal tip goes in with the tip pointing out. So then when you slide this back in, you've got this channel, and then it clicks in to the little hole there. So basically spring, metal tip like that, and then the pin goes back. Okay, so you try not to lose those. If you end up losing them, you can use a different pin. Sometimes you can still get that pin to stay, but your best bet is to not lose them, okay? So once you do that, then you can just kind of pull back on the charge, pull back on this, and then slide everything forward, and this will come out. And this is attached to the top on this, to the top of the actual gearbox. That's not always the case. So it's attached right here, and it's screwed there, and then the spring is right there to that, okay? And that should look pretty regular. So if you get that off, then we need to get the gearbox out of the receiver. So first thing, let's take the motor out, right? So we got to take the motor out from the bottom of the grip. This got weird. So the way this was, and I can't even tell how this was like this, there was a tiny screw in here, but there's no hole for what it went into. So anyway, I'd unscrewed this tiny screw, and then this was pressure on back here. So I popped this out. This popped out, right? So then it popped open. So I was like, that's great, but a spring went flying. So this tiny spring right here and this screw were what were holding this shut somehow. I am still confused as to how that was. I'm not too worried because I know even if I don't figure out exactly how that was back in there, if I really just go ahead and put a screw through here, that's going to hold that shut nice, and it's going to keep the motor in there, and it's still going to look fine because it's even could recess in. So I'm still going to look at that. I'm going to ask my one friend from Australia if he has an idea as to where or how that was supposed to go, because I don't even see a spot for any of that in there, any spot for springs. But that's one thing I wanted to point out, a weird thing that made no sense. So, all right, so here's the motor, kind of what you'd expect for this, okay? Now, the other things we still had to do, we had to remove, because this actually does have last round open, and this, so your little, this actually slides across, through the bottom here, holds that in. This one, actually, a lot of times they'll have a little pin. And this is a little pin, but it's actually a little tiny screw that's threaded. So there's threads right here for the first, say, couple millimeters. And so you just have to unscrew it, and then it comes out. Again, you don't want to lose that. So that's why I've got things taped together. All right. So you got that out. You push this pin through. I just use a punch of some sort, right? This is a pin that pushes through. One side is scored or whatever. And so you want to push it the other way, but either way, you can usually push it through fine and be okay. So we got that out. Lastly was this pin back here that holds the receiver in. Now this pin has something I've not seen before. So the pin came out, but it stayed because it had this little cotter pin locking it inside. Like, so the cotter pin was probably placed like here and then pushed in. I'm not entirely sure. Again, not a huge deal because I don't see that being needed on here because this pin should stay on tight anyway. But that was something unique that I've never seen before. So anyway, we'll see when I go to put it back together how important it is, or if I need to use a different pin, or if I can just use the same pin and figure out how to get that cotter pin back on there. But that's something I haven't seen before on any of these. So got it out finally, right? Click this to safety always, pull the trigger, and then you kind of just push it up and out. So usually your selector needs to be in safety because it moves that over there and it makes it easiest to push this out. All right, we finally got it to the point where I can access the spring. As always, flathead screwdriver, you just put it in, turn this till these notches line up, pull this out. There's your stock spring. Like I said, we're going to an SHS M95 from EMERBU Toys. And just to show you the differences in the stock spring, M95, you should feel pretty comfortable that you can go to M95 with any of these V2s that are metal gears. And these are metal gears. You know, even actually, if it had nylon gears, I think you'd be okay as well. You're just going to wear things out faster. But you can see it's definitely a bigger spring. So we got M95. This is probably, the stock one's probably like a M75 or M80 that it came with, okay? Putting that in, again, really easy. Just gonna go ahead and line it up. Take your screwdriver, push it in, turn it, clicks in place, and you're good to go. All right, so there we got your TTI AR-15, John Wick style gel blaster from ZHNEDUO Blaster, and we went ahead and we put a M95 SHS spring from EMERBU Toys in there, and I gave you a little kind of tutorial about how to take it apart and some of the weird parts with it. Hopefully it's going to go back together fine for me. Then I'll show it to you in action. We'll see what kind of differences we're getting in FPS. Thanks for your support. Comments, questions, post them below. Like, subscribe, share my channel with your friends. Participate in those monthly giveaways. Win over $300 in blasters and accessories. Thanks.